Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another moment with the mayor. And I'm very excited to have our Assistant Director of Community Development, Melissa Paleman. Thank you so much for joining us, Melissa.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to talk about Just Deeds, which is a new program that the City of Richfield is participating in. So can you tell us a little bit about what racial or restrictive covenants are on a property deed?
Sure. So I like to start with a couple of definitions because there are some words in there that people generally are not familiar with. First of all, a deed. A deed is a legal document that's used to transfer property from one party to another. So if you're selling your home, there will be a deed. It'll include a legal description of your property. It'll include your name as the seller and then the buyer's name. So that's the deed. A covenant is just another word for an agreement. Generally, it's used in property transfers in more formal settings, but that's all it is. It's an agreement. So a racially restrictive covenant or discriminatory covenant on a deed is an official agreement in that legal document not to sell the property to a particular group of people. For instance, it may say something like, your deed may say something like, no race or nationality other than white persons shall occupy or use this property, something like that.
And here in Richfield, we have racially restricted covenants from the past in our community, correct? And
Yes, we have many.
Mhm. So I know we'll talk about that in a little bit, but why don't we talk about what the Just Deeds project is?
Sure. So I'm going to back up just a little bit and talk first about the Mapping Prejudice project. And that's a project that came out of the U of M in 2016. It's a project that created the first ever comprehensive visualization of racial covenants in an American city. So they did Minneapolis first. So while racial covenants appeared on deeds in 1910 in Minneapolis, again, these are things that were recorded on individual pieces of property. So there wasn't really a way for us to envision the extent of these or the lasting impact. So Just Deeds comprehensively has gone through every property record in the city and now expanded to Hennepin County and Ramsey to look to see which of those properties have a racially restrictive or discriminatory covenant on them. So based on that, the Just Deeds program was created. It's a coalition of organizations and involves the Minnesota Association of City Attorneys, Minneapolis area realtors, Edina Title, a number of cities, and some other organizations that have come together to help Minnesotans learn about these covenants and learn about systemic racism in housing, how that racism has impacted communities of color, and how that impact can still be felt today. Their main mission is one of education. You know, most people don't know this history. Many have never heard of a racial covenant. They likely have no idea that the federal government directly and deliberately favored white people with a number of its programs, or that developers, realtors, banks, and even cities did the same thing. So in addition to that education component, the Just Deeds project also gives people the ability to take a deliberate action to renounce a covenant if they find one on their property.
Great, thank you for that description of the project. And so why is this Just Deeds project so important to our residents here in Richfield?
Sure. Well, you alluded to this earlier that we have covenants on a lot of properties in Richfield. But one of the reasons it's so important here is just the extent of the issue. In Hennepin County, they found over 23,000 racially restrictive covenants. Over 3,700 are just in Richfield. So covenants are more prevalent here in Richfield than really any other city in Hennepin County, except for Minneapolis, which is obviously quite a bit bigger. And now, while the covenants are absolutely illegal and unenforceable now, if we look at the distribution of the covenants in Richfield and compare it to where people of color currently live, you can see that the discriminatory patterns are still very visible. Our community and communities in the metro remain very segregated based on those historical practices. And that's important for everyone to see. Uh, Covenants also obviously depressed homeownership rates for people of color. They limited their ability to build wealth through equity. Today, the homeownership rate for Black households in Richfield is only 24%, versus for white households, it's 71%.
Wow.
So participation in Just Deeds in our city is an official commitment by the city to education about systemic racism. It's an acknowledgement of our participation in creating and perpetuating racist systems. And it's a commitment to working within our organization and with the community to do better, to close these gaps.
Those statistics are just horrible to hear, the huge inequity in home ownership rates. And knowing that for so many families, that is one of the primary ways of building housing stability, of building family wealth through home ownership. So that's just, that's absolutely horrible. And I'm glad that we're participating, and then I'll wrap up with just a connection on kind of what other things we're doing to address this issue. But what can homeowners in Richfield do to get their racial covenant discharge on their home?
Sure. So through the Just Deeds program, we provide residents with access to volunteer attorneys that can help property owners to officially renounce or discharge the covenant from their property. The discriminatory language will not go away with this action, and we actually don't want it to. We don't want to erase the history, but it does allow a property owner to add language to their deed that specifically rejects the racist language in that property document. To participate, residents can just go to our website and type in Just Deeds in the search bar. From there, you can search an interactive map and find out if there's actually a covenant on your property. If there is, excuse me, if there is, you can sign up to be connected to an attorney who can help you move through this process. This is totally free. Volunteer attorneys will help you. And in addition, Hennepin County has waived all of the filing fees. So this should be free and accessible to anyone who would like to participate. And again, you can just go to our website to find the specifics and more information on how to do that.
Great, thank you so much. And then lastly, the last question I have is, how does this project around education, around racial covenants, line up with the other equity work that we're doing across the city?
Sure. Well, as many people know, we've been really prioritizing our equity and inclusion work over the past several years. We've joined the Government Alliance for Racial Equity and created a team of staff people to help guide work in each individual department in that realm. Last year, the city also hired an equity administrator to lead and broaden those efforts. The city has also participated and sponsored equity trainings for staff, for our policymakers, for commissioners, and we're working to specifically create programs that will address the racial disparities, like that homeownership gap in Richfield. One example is our down payment assistance program, and that's been designed specifically to reach households who haven't historically had access to homeownership. So while there's a lot of work to be done individually and collectively, Just Deeds is a real tangible way for people to begin to explore systemic racism, which can be something that is really hard to wrap your mind around. If you have been a beneficiary of these systems, as most white people have, it's really easy for them to be invisible. And this is a way to see how those systems continue to perpetuate these problems, even though you're not seeing that overt racism.
Absolutely. And I just want to thank you, Assistant Director Palman, and the Community Development Department for the awesome work that you've been doing for years around advancing equity, especially in commercial and home ownership, in housing and commercial and housing. There's so many programs that you've been leading the way with for years, including our Kids at Home program, which really helps support some of our lowest income families in Richfield to have housing stability with kids, with people who have kids in our school districts and in our schools here in Richfield, but with wraparound services, a housing subsidy to make sure that they have everything they need so that their kids can thrive in their education. and in their community as a family, but also the work that we've done around preserving, improving the quality of, and maintaining our existing affordable housing, expanding into new affordable housing, making sure that when we do think about affordable housing, we're also thinking about things like accessibility as well. And so there's so many different things that our community development department has been leading with around this area, because one part of it is the education, which is what Justice does, but another part is going back into how we, what our systems look like today, and overhauling those systems to make sure that we're not perpetuating these inequities. And I do think of our community development department as a leader in the city that has been doing that for a very long time. So thank you to you for your leadership in that, and a huge thanks to our whole department, and thank you to the folks at Justice who have brought this to our city, and now we are participating in it. So thank you for that overview, Melissa.